Alright, we're next to our next step, which will be pretty much our final step here. I'm going to add the last two, which is seating the bullet and then putting a factory crimp in. Once again, we're using the Lee hand loading press. We've got our case that's already been primed. There's a load of powder in there, green dot powder, the proper ratio, mix of powder, I guess I'll say. The grain weight of powder, the proper load is in there. And we're going to load it with one of these 175 grain Lee cast 40 caliber molds. Now this is a tumble lube mold, like the 9mm I was casting in some of my other videos, where it's got multiple grooves on the bullet, as you can see, and that helps keep the when you tumble lube, which is where I had explained in the other video, where you put it into a tub and roll it around with some of the stuff that looks like Hershey syrup, the liquid Alox, on there. It's a nice waxy coat. This is obviously dry because it's pretty much filled with wax. I can scrape some of it off with my finger, which I don't want to do a whole lot. But I've already got this set up to go the proper depth in this cartridge on this particular press. And what our bullet seating die looks like is just one of these. Now, you screw it in there, and I'll show you here in a second, and you tighten down the nut here so it won't move anywhere. Then you can finally adjust with this little lever up top the depth of your cartridge. I used a set of calipers, which I'll show in another video sometime, to seat the exact depth where I needed to go, and went from there. So what we'll do is we'll take our powder through expander die off that we used in the last video. Obviously, if you have multiple people, it's like, oh, this takes a long time. That's a lot of time for one shell. If you do this in stations, if you have 50 or 100 brass to do, and you pop them through, you can load up a bunch. You don't have to change dies out for every round. That would be a tedious task and stuff. So we're going to go ahead and screw this in. Like I said, I've already got this properly set where it needs to go. Now, when you screw it in, you want to be careful. You don't want to screw it in with the locking nut here or with the top here, because you'll mess up your measurements. You use the checkered part here and just screw it in with the middle part, middle fat part, I guess what it would be. Alright, it's in there. I'm going to give this locking ring a quick tight in there. You notice it's not linked up as far as the other ones were. That's perfectly fine because it's set the way it needs to be. If it was all the way up there and I put my case in there, I'm going to have a nasty dent in my case because it's going to bend the case up because it just won't have room to go. I'm going to go ahead and load up my cartridge. Now, when you get powder in these, okay, you want to try to keep gravity from working against you. So I'm going to keep this as upright as I can. I'm not promising I'm not going to spill anything because I am kind of clumsy every once in a while, those who know me from school. I'm going to take my cast bullet, I'm going to seat it in. You probably can't see because my arm's in the way, but I'll get the seat in there. I just set it on top. Now it looks a little crooked now, that's okay. When we feed it up through the die, now this is where it takes a little bit more oomph to do. Okay, I'm just going to take and squeeze it in all the way. Our bullet should now officially be seated. And hopefully this isn't messed up, or I'm going to make a monkey out of myself here if I don't. Absolutely perfect. We see now that it's seated in there, and the bullet looks very well seated. It looks pretty attractive to go with on that. Now the bad thing we have now is we think that it's alright to shoot now because it looks like a perfectly loaded cartridge. It's primed, it's got a powder charge, and a bullet perfectly seated in there. If we go out and shoot this now, when we go to chamber it, it's going to push that bullet even further in there because this case mouth is still belled out to help guide that bullet in there. If we didn't bell that case out and we tried to push that lead projectile in there, it would smash the brass up and cause all sorts of problems. So we need to take our bell from our case mouth, and we need to crimp it down around the bullet to hold it into place and to get it back to originally factory specs. So I'll set that down for a second. We do that with what's called a Lee factory crimp die, and it's a lot similar to the bullet seating die, where it's got a knob where you can adjust the level of crimp. I crimp my bullets pretty well, not going to town tightening it down on them, but it's enough to keep them well situated. So I'm going to unscrew this. Make sure you unscrew it too with the middle part. You don't want to unscrew or mess with the exact measurements if you have it set up in your die. Same thing goes with this one. Now they look a lot the same, except the bullet seating die, this will give you a difference. The bullet seating die has a taller adjustment on it here, and the middle part, the knurled metal piece that you can twist in, is a lot wider in the bullet seating mold. As you notice, the crimp mold is a lot narrower. So that's how you can tell the two apart. I also stick one on one end of my die set and the other on the other end, so I don't have any confusion. This is already set up as well for this particular press. I'm going to screw it in there. This would be a lot of effort for just to load one round, like I said. Like we're not going to do that. We're going to load up a bunch at a time, but just for demonstration, I'm going to give it a nice little tug to lock it in there, and it's set up, ready to go. You notice as the last one, it didn't go up about that far. This one will actually shut all the way. That's perfectly fine. That's how it's supposed to be adjusted. I'm going to go ahead and stick my cartridge in there, feed it up in there, use a little bit of strength, which I don't have a whole lot of, to push it together. Now there was a lot of resistance before it popped finally into place, as you notice. That's it belling the case back in, or crimping the case back in, and when I pull it back through, it crimps it again. And there we have one perfectly fully loaded 40 caliber handgun bullet, ready to take to the range and ready to fire my Glock 23. That's all there is to it, to the reloading process. Like I said, that's a lot of work, it seems, for one round, but when you go through and you go for each station, if I have 100 brass that I go through, I can load up a couple hundred rounds in an hour with this method if I just keep going at it and go through. Very good portable press to have. I'd recommend one. Thank you for your time, and I'll post some more videos soon.